Thanks for joining us for this episode of our iXerv HCM and Payroll Cloudcast. Today, kind of a fun topic, but a serious one as well, is HR Implementation Myth Busters. And I'm joined by the folks from Raven Intel. We'll meet them in a moment. My name is AJ Whalen. I'll be your host and moderator for this session. And our speakers today, obviously, in addition to myself, Bonnie Tinder, she's founder and CEO from Raven Intel. Bonnie's got more than 20 years of experience in HR technology. She's held positions in implementation, marketing, sales leadership with companies like Cornerstone, NGA, Ceridian, ADP. Also, Michele Davies is joining us. She is CFO and VP of Research with Raven Intel. And Michele is an economist and data scientist. She's got a PhD from the University of Chicago and a background in developing products and partnerships in startup environments that include alternative energy and corporate social responsibilities. So welcome to Bonnie and to Michele to our Cloudcast today. We appreciate you joining us.
Than's for having us.
It's great to be here.
You know, it's a great topic, and it's kind of a have fun with the Mythbusters part of it. I'm a kind of a nerd who likes the Mythbusters TV show, so it's fun. So we're not going to maybe cover some of the things that Adam and Jamie cover on that TV show, like, you know, whether man landed on the moon, but topics that are very important to HR and payroll and HR technology is really at the heart of what we're talking about today, and is at the heart of what Raven Intel is all about. So why don't you give us just a quick overview and background on what Raven Intel is, in case someone who's watching is not familiar, and we'll get right into the myths after that.
Great. Well, Raven Intel is a B2B peer review site, and our intent is to help customers really hire, find, and review the best consulting firm for an HR software project. We allow customers to come and have access to all of their options. You know, if they're implementing a SuccessFactors, Workday, Oracle, Cornerstone, ServiceNow, Ultimate Software, you know, product, they can come to Raven Intel and see all of the consulting firms that could potentially do that project, as well as read peer reviews about those firms as well.
It's a great, you know, objective source for that. And for somebody like me who's been around in the industry, in the consulting industry, in the HR technology industry for many years, you know, there's word of mouth that goes around. And in the past, you know, you do your reference checks if you're looking for a partner. But I think the importance behind what you're doing and why we're here and why we invited you in today is that objective research, and is identifying trends, is going beyond just what a referral tells you. And then maybe, you know, Michele, as the kind of the research head, is kind of diving into the ways, the trends and things that this tells you about the industry, and that can help customers out. And I think that's really important. So I appreciate what you guys are doing, and that's why we invited you in, and we're really excited to talk about this. And you've got already in just the, you know, the year plus that Raven's been around, you've got a ton of research on your website, and the URLs on the screen there. But the best part about this is it is customer fed feedback. This is not partner case studies. This isn't you know, paid references. This is objective feedback from the customers. So that's where the source of the information is, and hopefully that is important for our viewers of this as well, because it's good to hear kind of the unvarnished truth, if you will. So appreciate having you here. And we're going to jump right into our Mythbusters section. So what we've done, and you've recently published a paper, if you will, with some of the key myths, or you kind of prove or disprove, that are out there that are based on your research. And we're going to walk through 6 of those topics, and I'll let you explain what your findings are and what the data is showing, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to dive right into the first one, and the first one is interesting for those of us who've been around for a long time. But you know, the bigger that a partner is, the better a project will be. So does the size of the partner mean anything? Is it correlated to success, and what are you finding?
That's right. So we are finding that it is the size of the partner organization, the consulting organization, is not correlated with the success of the project, and that's on a number of different scales. So to go back a little bit, to be very clear, yeah, so our data is from the reviews that HR technology customers have done for us. And so this is what we're looking to do, is amplify the voice of the customer and really glean the wisdom of the crowds here. And so all of these results are very data driven, and they're from folks who have had implementations at their firms. So to get into, the bigger the partner, the better the project, we find that customer satisfaction, as reported by customers in their reviews, is absolutely uncorrelated to the size of the SI doing the work for that project.
Now, do you think that customers kind of, and I'm speaking with my marketing hat on for a second, do customers get caught up in the marketing? Obviously, the larger firms have bigger marketing budgets and flashier content and all of that. Is it driven by that? Is it driven by relationships that maybe the C-level has with the larger firms? Or are there other things that drive maybe that perception that the larger is always better? And the larger might be better in some cases, but is it the perception? What drives that perception?
Right. I think that there's definitely this idea that, no one ever got fired for hiring one of the big four, right? And so, those are seen as a safe bet. You've seen their advertisements at the airport, and in addition, the partners of the firm or whatever may have relationships with those really big firms already, and are doing other work with them. And so it's easy to bring them in, and I'm not going to pick on them, but I think that, just because someone has done a good job, auditing, doesn't mean that they know how to implement an HR software system. So I think that is, you can't, it doesn't always translate.
And I think
the main takeaway is that what we found is that there are more important criteria to consider when choosing a partner than just the fact that a partner is well known or large.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I was actually just about to jump in and say something similar. I think what you're pointing out here is that there are many facets to the decision around choosing a partner, and it's not just around the size of the organization. And from my perspective, I've worked for the large firms and I've worked for smaller firms, and yeah, there are differences in a lot of things between them. But at the end of the day, I think the point of this is for the customers to do their homework and understand that there are a lot more things involved in making that decision than just the size of the company or just whether you've heard of them or not. There may be some firms. So I think it's a great perspective to look at. So, okay,
Yep.
Let's move on to myth number 2. Myth number 2. My father always said, like I think most people's fathers said, you get what you pay for, but price is everything. Is that true?
False.
False indeed. So we ask the folks who fill out reviews, we ask them, what were the important criteria in choosing the implementer for your project? What was important? And so, they say, some people, say, oh, it's the experience of the firm, the reputation of the firm, the price that they offered, their location. Anyway, so there's a lot of different answers, and we say, pick all of them that apply. And we find that when people answer that price was the only important factor, those folks end up with projects that they're not happy with, that are less likely to be on budget. So even though price was the important thing, over 60% of those where people said price was the most important aspect, 60% of those projects have gone over budget, and 50% went over schedule. So those folks are maybe getting what they paid for. And we find actually that the customers who are the happiest and have the best project outcomes are the ones who said that price was one of the important criteria. That, you know, it's not like they say money is no object, but they say, listen, price was important, reputation of the firm was important, the experience of the firm in similar past projects, those were all important things. And those are the people who are most satisfied, who get their projects delivered on schedule and on budget.
And I think too, you know, when a customer sees and looks at a very low price tag in relation to other, you know, potential options, you know, a lot of times what we've seen is it comes in as a low proposal quote, but then all of a sudden, you know, mid-project, there's change orders that end up, you know, costing more than some of the other options that they didn't consider, you know, or rejected back in the pre-sales phase. And so, you know, if the price is too good to be true, it probably is, because you might see change orders that will pump that up mid or late in the game.
And then really no one is happy.
Yeah.
Nope.
Now,
right.
do you think that the price aspect, and there's probably a lot of different reasons why, are companies making the decision to do projects like this, to go to, say, cloud HCM technologies with the same criteria that they used to evaluate, say, an on-premise ERP implementation 20 years ago? Is it the same rationale? Are they treating it the same way? Or are you simply looking at this in the perception that this is an easier thing to do because it's cloud-based and that we don't have any servers and tech teams and so on, so this should cost less, just get it underneath this price tag? Is that what's happening?
You know, it's interesting. I think cloud has been around long enough that I don't think customers necessarily feel that it is less expensive than, you know, the on-premise options were. I think they expect it to be more predictable because it's cloud, and, you know, the whole idea behind cloud is this predictable cost model that you know exactly how much your license fees are going to be per month and things like that. So I think in that case, the implementation paradigm, you know, does end up being expensive, because as we see in these projects, you know, they'll go over cost or over time. And, you know, I think that more of the notion is the customer thinks, oh, well, it should have been predictable because cloud is predictable. Or, you know, in some cases it should have been faster because cloud was supposed to be so much easier. But I don't think that either one of those things are accurate.
And I think too, there's a little bit of the promise of the cloud model being like the 80-20, 90-10, whatever, choose your numbers. And you find the reality is that may fit certain cookie cutter things, but it doesn't really fit the whole business process that you've got to run. And at the end of the day, you go in with the RDS kind of pricing model and you find out there's a lot more to it than that. And I think that's, in my experience, what adds to the disappointment people have around price, or the fact that it becomes such a challenge for them, is they're sold one thing and then they realize later on that they can't get what they envisioned on that price. Mm-hmm. So that's, and honestly, it's incumbent upon the partner to be upfront with them and make sure that they're educating them on that in the sales process as well. So speaking from the partner side, I'm not condemning the customers for not understanding. I think the partners need to be more forthcoming sometimes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's move on to number 3. The more complex a project is, the less happy the customer will be. This is a fun one.
Yeah, I think in this case, you know, a lot of people have come to us and said, oh, well, it must just be that people with simple, straightforward projects, you know, of course they're getting good ratings because it was an easy project. But as it turns out, what we find is that the more there are two kinds of happy customers. There are the customers who are the folks with simple projects are happy, and then the folks with quite complex projects are happy. It's the folks in the middle who are less content with their projects. And we measure complexity in a couple of different ways, and this pattern, this kind of U-shaped pattern of customer satisfaction, holds for all of these. So we look at complexity in terms of what were the number of modules installed during the project. And so customers who just had one module installed, easy peasy, they're happy. And then the folks with 5, 6 modules, they're also happy. And I think that what is happening there is that with the simple projects, there are a lot of folks who can do that, implement those projects well. And so boom, you find someone and they do the project. And then with the really complex projects, I think people there are doing their homework, really researching like which SI to use, which implementation partner is really going to get this job done well. And so I think what's happening is that those really complex projects, the customer is putting a lot more work into making sure that they find the right partner. And so, as I said, we measure complexity in a couple of different ways. One is the number of modules. One is the number of global regions that the project encompasses. And there again, one region, folks are happy. 4 or 5 regions, folks are happy. It's that middle range where they're less. And then also just in terms of the type of project, we find that ongoing support, customers are happy, and that's just kind of the maintenance and optimization, kind of maybe the easier project. And then the other folks who are happy are the ones doing initial deployments, which is, that heavy lifting on the front end. Those customers are happy too. And it's sort of the add-on deployments that there's a dip in customer satisfaction.
Do you think that the middle ground, the ones who you say have that dip in satisfaction, is it because maybe the lack of complexity they have, they just kind of make the decision more quickly, they don't do as much of the homework? Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, I think that explains it, is that maybe with those mid-range complexity projects, they're doing as much homework as they would have done for the simple ones. And for the simple ones, that was enough homework to have done. But on for those little bit more mid-range complexity, they still didn't, think really hard about the selection of their partner, and thought it was maybe an easy project, and didn't dig in and find exactly the right partner to do that work.
Okay, no, this was a very interesting one to me, and I'm very interested in the response, and this is where the research really shows the value of what you're doing, because it's something that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of when I talked about projects before. I think it's kind of a no-brainer to think the simple ones have a higher satisfaction rating, but I think this maybe to many will be kind of counterintuitive to say that the more complex will also be more satisfied. But that's pretty good job of identifying the research. The fourth myth, okay, and this we sort of touched on this a couple of ones ago when we talked about price, but change orders come up in every implementation, but on-time delivery is more important.
Yeah, so once again, false.
False, yeah. And we always say there's a couple of hallmarks with reviews that come in that are not satisfied, or reviews that were scored lower. Change orders is a hallmark that we can spot a mile away where a customer is not going to be satisfied if they've had a lot of change orders. The other hallmark is a change in team as well. So those two things, if those happen during a project, that's going to definitely impact customer satisfaction. But what we have seen is that the fewer the change orders that come up, the more satisfied that a client is. And in fact, on-time delivery is not as important as you look across the reviews that we've had as the fact that it was a predictable sort of delivery, and budget. And so I think one of the things that we tell customers is that they need to be very aware of what the statement of work includes before they move forward with the implementation. And not only do they need to read the statement of work themselves, their entire team needs to read and understand what that is, so that midpoint, they're not necessarily, changing something that's going to impact the scope of work, and also that they're aware of what the consulting firm should be delivering based on what they have contractually put in place. But in a lot of cases, the customer has a change, and that changes the scope of work. In those situations, they still will remain satisfied. So we ask them, was this your change, or was it a change that wasn't identified by the consulting firm? So, if it's a change on the customer side, that's not as problematic as when the customer says, my consulting firm did not identify this particular area or interface or integration during the sales process, and now I'm stuck with extra cost and extra time that I didn't bank on.
And I think one of the surprising things that the data came up with here is that when I looked at projects that were well scoped and not well scoped, on schedule and behind schedule, I actually find that customer satisfaction with projects that are behind schedule, but say that they didn't have many change orders, those folks who are behind schedule are actually happier than the folks whose projects were on schedule but had multiple change orders. And I think that is probably counterintuitive, but that's what the data tells us, and which is surprising, but I think interesting, which to my mind means that people would rather have they don't want the chaos, they don't want the unexpected, and so better to be orderly but just a little behind schedule than chaotic and on schedule.
And I think one thing from my perspective, from the partner side, the reason I think this is one of the most important ones we're going to discuss today from a customer perspective is that this obviously impacts the satisfaction and the perception of the project, but the root cause of the change orders can come from different directions. And as you pointed out, it's a very, very good piece of advice that the customers need to read the statement of work very closely and have the entire team read it, because change orders can come from the partner side, whether it's resources or not scoping properly or not planning properly, but oftentimes I think it's maybe an even split. They come from the customer side, from not really understanding what they were kind of getting into as much, and or the ramifications of certain changes. So this one, I think, is in my opinion, is kind of a shared approach, but this is really important for customers who are going to be embarking on a project to understand how this can impact not just the satisfaction, but the bottom line of a project. Let's face it. And we go back and talk about prices, everything, or the perception of things, and this is a big deal for a lot of customers. And it's so I'm glad you touched on this. This is really important. I think this could probably be a whole session in itself if we wanted to. So I think there will be definitely some good feedback around this one as well.
Right.
Number 5. So this is the, is it black and white? Can you clearly judge a consulting partner as a success or a failure?
Once again, we're going to have to go with false on that one. So we see that one of the questions we asked in the reviews is, what was your role on the project? Were you the decision maker? Were you the project leader, a project team member, etc.? And it really, people's perceptions of the project depend on where they sit. So for example, the folks who describe themselves as decision makers have much higher ratings of the projects overall than the folks who are analysts or end users, or were on the project team. And that to me is really interesting. I think that the reason that happens is if you're the decision maker, the folks who are actively working on the project, they're also trying to tell you how well the project is going. And so those folks don't see the ins and outs and the daily warts and so forth of making the sausage and getting that project made. And so that I think is really really great, and why we seek to get really a 360 view of, from everyone involved on the project, because we think those different views have validity and are important to see in terms of project success.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you get feedback from a customer, obviously we can read what their ratings were. Do you seek out different levels? Because I agree 100% that the perception based from a project sponsor versus somebody in the trenches project, it can be quite different. Do you actively seek out different levels for this feedback?
Absolutely. We're interested to know from all different angles, and then we do see a difference in perception depending on their role in the project.
And I think the main takeaway with this is that, when you're talking to customers and, or vetting references, that you need to look at multiple points of view, not just the executive decision maker, but the folks who have those day-to-day interactions with the consulting firm, because, in order to get the full broad picture, you really need to know both.
Okay, no, I agree. It's a very important point, and I think it's what makes the research that you're doing that much more important, because it's explaining that there are so many nuances and layers to the data and to what's behind this. And I think Michele is head of research that really goes to what you do on a daily basis, is try to explain this on different levels. And we tend to look at it from, well, I got a reference, they said thumbs up, let's go, and it's not always that way.
Right, and you'll see clearly on Raven Intel on the reviews the role of the reviewer as well. So you'll see decision maker versus team lead versus project member.
I also think that the fact that we post the reviews anonymously allows people to be candid with their responses and their assessments. So, as the reviews come into us, we know who the reviewer is, and we do that so that we can make sure that it's a valid review, that these folks who are who they say they are, but we also promise that their name is not going to be used, and that way they, if the review is a little bit negative, they aren't worried about repercussions or damaging the relationship, but can actually provide useful, candid feedback for other people to be able to learn from and benefit from.
I think that's a good point, and we've seen it from iXerv's perspective, where we have had customers give you feedback on our work, and it's easier to get them sometimes to do that and to be honest and give you the time, because that anonymity helps them be a little more honest and straightforward and not worry about the fallout, or not worry about a relationship of a partner they may still be working through. So that's also important too in terms of the validity of the data. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Number 6, this is, again, this is something that we could talk about in a whole nother session. So payroll is hard. This, I had a boss who used to say this would be what she would refer to as a duh point, but.
This is one we will confirm.
Yes.
Yes, for sure. Payroll is hard, and we see that the payroll implementations are rated the lowest in terms of customer satisfaction. So we have reviews for all of the various HCM modules, whether it's HR core, talent, recruiting, or payroll, and by and large, the payroll implementation is rated the lowest overall, along with the least on budget sort of area as well. And I think a lot of times with payroll, there's so many nuances as it relates to experience in different geographies that I think the takeaway for this is that you need to ensure that the partner that you choose really has experience locally within the various geographies that you'll be implementing, as there's so many different regulations and liabilities in per area. And so I think to go in sort of with your eyes open, that the payroll piece of any implementation is probably going to be the most challenging, but also to ensure that the partner that you choose has done it before and it has done it in the countries that you'll be looking to implement.
And I think the nature of payroll itself, obviously, when you get into taxation and just the way it affects the business process, I think there's zero room for error there. You never want to be draw attention to the fact that payroll's not run properly. If you're doing say a recruiting process and something is kind of a little off and you can fix it, you're not going to have as much exposure as if your payroll's not run properly. I think that puts a little extra pressure. But the fact that everyone runs payroll slightly differently in terms of their in-house processes, what they do themselves, what they outsource, what they track, what they don't track, how they handle the process, it's not surprising to me that this would be one of the things that would have the lower satisfaction ratings as a whole.
And there's zero room for error too. I mean, if you even have minor errors that impact an employee visibly, certainly as it relates to payroll, that's going to be that much more amplified as problematic as this when you start getting your employees aware of issues.
I had an instructor in a class, I won't date myself and say what year it was a very long time ago, it was at Ceridian, and what she said was payroll should be like a baseball umpire. If you're doing your job, nobody should comment or even notice that you're there. It just should go smoothly, but as soon as you make one mistake, everyone knows who you are. So that's, I think that's...
Nobody thanks you for getting payroll right.
Correct. Yeah, but everyone knows if you don't. So that's a very good point as well. So appreciate the feedback on that. Those are the 6 myths we're going to cover for this. Obviously, we could go on for hours if we wanted to, but really important that customers and people who are watching this video know that Raven Intel is doing a ton of research on a daily basis. There's new information posted all the time. You do your own publishing of things like this and other feedback. So, for them to kind of touch base with you. We have this section at the end of our CloudCast, so I call the last 60, which is kind of our parting shots or our summary. And rather than doing it myself and letting everyone listen to me talk, Bonnie or Michele or both, I'm going to turn this over to you and let you kind of summarize your thoughts and where you think things are going and any final comments.
Yeah, I guess I would leave with a call to action and a request, which is that if you are an HR tech customer who is looking for a partner for a cloud project, please come to ravenintel.com and see the reviews. Go out there and look for firms who have done projects that are similar to the one you're undertaking, and we can help you reach out to those folks as well, and that's free to you. And the other thing is, if you are an HR tech user and you've gone through a project, we would love to hear your story. We'd love to get a review from you and to help have your comments really help the rest of the HR community to have the best projects and the best tech implementations and deployments that they can.
All right, I appreciate that, and I think it's really important too, because the research becomes even more valuable based on the volume. The more information you get, the becomes even better for the customers. So obviously the customer community hopefully will become more involved and support that. So appreciate that. I'm going to put up our contact information here as I do a bit of a wrap up. I do want to thank Bonnie and Michele from Raven Intel for joining us today. A little bit of a different topic for us in the Cloudcast, not diving into a how-to session, but really talking to customers about what's important for their projects. And I think this is a topic that's again, should be of utmost importance to customers, but is highlighting all the good work that they're doing over at Raven Intel. So please do check out their site. At iXerv, obviously, we think very highly of it. You can go to iXerv.com. On our homepage, we have a link to Raven Intel where you can see what our customers think about us. So we think it's a critical avenue for customers to share and to learn more about the partners, and appreciate all of the involvement and the information you've given us today, Bonnie and Michele, and hopefully we can do a follow-up to this again as we go forward. But thanks for joining us today, and thanks to everyone for watching this version of the iXerv HCM and Payroll Cloudcast, and we hope you'll join us again for a future video.